In a lively city filled with art galleries, music halls, and street performers, there lived a pianist named Adrian. He was known throughout the area for his incredible skill at the piano. His fingers danced across the keys with ease, creating melodies that left audiences in awe. But Adrian wasn't just famous for his talent, he was also infamous for his arrogance. He believed he was better than everyone else, and he didn't hesitate to let people know it. Whether he was performing on stage or simply walking down the street, Adrian carried himself with an air of superiority that made others feel small. One chilly evening, Adrian decided to perform at a cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The cafe was a popular spot for musicians, poets, and artists who wanted to share their work with the world. Every Thursday night they held an open mic event where anyone could sign up to perform. Adrian had heard about these nights but had never bothered to attend before. To him it seemed like a waste of time. Why would he want to listen to amateurs when he was already the best? But tonight he felt restless and thought it might be fun to show off his skills to a new audience. When Adrian arrived at the cafe, he was surprised by how crowded it was. People sat shoulder to shoulder at small, wooden tables, sipping coffee and chatting excitedly. A makeshift stage stood at the front of the room, lit by a single spotlight. Adrian walked confidently to the hostess, who handed him a clipboard so he could add his name to the list of performers. As he scanned the names ahead of him, one caught his eye. Clara. It was a simple name, unremarkable compared to some of the more dramatic aliases other performers used. Curious, Adrian glanced around the room, wondering which of the strangers sitting quietly in the dim light was Clara. His eyes landed on a woman sitting alone near the back of the cafe. She looked completely ordinary, dressed in a plain sweater and jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. There was nothing flashy or attention-grabbing about her appearance. In fact, she seemed almost invisible in the bustling crowd. Adrian couldn't help but smirk. Surely this was Clara. How could someone so unassuming possibly follow his performance? He imagined her stumbling nervously onto the stage, fumbling with the piano keys, and leaving the audience disappointed. The thought amused him, and he decided to stay and watch. The evening began with a series of performances that varied in quality. Some were impressive, while others fell flat, but none of them came close to matching Adrian's level of expertise. When it was finally his turn to take the stage, he strode up with his usual confidence. The spotlight shone brightly on him as he took his seat at the piano. Without hesitation, he launched into one of his most complex compositions. His fingers moved swiftly, producing a dazzling array of notes that filled the room. The audience was mesmerized, clapping enthusiastically after every crescendo. Adrian basked in the admiration, feeding off the energy of the crowd. As he played the final note, Adrian stood up and gave a slight bow, soaking in the applause. But instead of stepping off the stage, he lingered, turning his gaze toward Clara. He leaned toward the microphone and said, "Let's see what you got." His voice dripped with sarcasm, and a few people in the audience chuckled uncomfortably. They could sense the challenge in his tone, the subtle mockery behind his words. Clara, however, didn't react. She remained seated in her corner, calmly, sipping her tea as if she hadn't heard him at all. After a moment, Clara set her cup down and stood up. She walked slowly toward the stage, her movements deliberate and unhurried. There was no trace of nervousness or self-doubt in her demeanor. If anything, she seemed almost serene, as though she were completely unaware of the weight of expectation hanging over her. Adrian watched her closely, trying to read her expression, but her face remained impassive. When she reached the stage, she climbed the steps and took her place at the piano without saying a word. Clara adjusted the bench slightly, positioning herself comfortably in front of the instrument. Then she placed her hands gently on the keys. For a brief moment, the room fell silent, the anticipation palpable. Adrian crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, a faint smirk still playing on his lips. He fully expected her to falter under the pressure, to stumble awkwardly through a basic piece that would pale in comparison to his own virtuosic display. But then Clara began to play, and everything changed. The first notes she struck were soft and delicate like the whisper of a breeze through leaves. It wasn't flashy or technical. It was something far more profound. Each note carried a depth of emotion that resonated deeply with the listeners. The melody flowed effortlessly, weaving a story that felt both intimate and universal. Adrian's smirk faded as he listened. He had anticipated mediocrity, but what he heard was brilliance. Clara's playing wasn't just technically perfect. It was soulful, evoking feelings that words alone could never capture. As the piece unfolded, the entire cafe was spellbound. Conversations ceased. Cups were lowered onto tables, and even the baristas behind the counter paused to listen. Adrian found himself leaning forward involuntarily, his eyes fixed on Clara's hands as they glided gracefully over the keys. He realized with growing unease that her music wasn't just beautiful, it was powerful. It spoke directly to the heart, bypassing intellect and ego. Adrian had always prided himself on his ability to dazzle audiences with his technical prowess, but Clara's performance was different. It wasn't about showing off or proving superiority. It was about connection. Despite his initial skepticism, Adrian couldn't deny the impact Clara's music was having on him. He felt a strange mix of admiration and envy bubbling within him. Here was someone who had achieved something he had never even considered possible, making music that transcended mere performance. By the time Clara reached the final notes of her piece, Adrian's confidence had been shaken to its core, and yet he couldn't look away. Something about her presence on stage and the honesty of her music held him captive. Little did he know, this encounter would mark the beginning of a journey that would change him forever. As Clara played the final note of her piece, the room seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, there was complete silence, as if everyone was too stunned to react. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the cafe. It started with a few hesitant claps but quickly grew into a thunderous ovation. People stood up, cheering and whistling, their faces glowing with admiration. Some even wiped away tears, moved by the emotional depth of Clara's performance. Adrian, still standing near the wall, felt frozen in place. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, but his expression had shifted from smugness to something closer to disbelief. Clara sat quietly at the piano for a few seconds, letting the sound linger in the air before she finally stood up. She gave a small nod to the audience, her face calm and composed, almost as if the overwhelming response didn't affect her at all. Then she stepped off the stage and returned to her seat in the corner without saying a word. The contrast between her humble demeanor and the electrifying power of her music struck Adrian deeply. He couldn't understand how someone so unassuming could create something so extraordinary. As the next performer took the stage, Adrian found himself unable to focus. His mind kept replaying Clara's piece, trying to dissect what made it so special. Later that evening, after the open mic had ended and most of the crowd had dispersed, Adrian approached Clara. She was gathering her things, preparing to leave, when he cleared his throat to get her attention. "That was incredible," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and reluctance. It wasn't easy for him to admit that someone else might be better than him, especially not in front of others. But Clara didn't seem fazed by his compliment. She looked up at him with a gentle smile and replied, "Thank you. Music isn't about showing off, it's about connecting." Her words hit Adrian like a punch to the gut. He had always thought of music as a way to prove his superiority, a means to stand above the rest. Yet here was Clara, treating it as a form of communication, a bridge between hearts. Her perspective was so different from his own that it forced him to question everything he believed about his craft. For the first time in years, Adrian felt a flicker of doubt creep into his mind. Was he missing something important? Had he been chasing the wrong goals all along? Over the next few days, Adrian couldn't stop thinking about Clara and her performance. He replayed fragments of her piece in his head, trying to figure out how she had managed to convey such raw emotion through simple melodies. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. No matter how hard he practiced or how many technical exercises he completed, he couldn't replicate the kind of connection Clara had achieved with her audience. It wasn't just skill. It was something deeper, something he couldn't quite put into words. Determined to understand her secret, Adrian decided to seek Clara out again. He asked around and discovered that she often performed at smaller venues across the city. After a bit of searching, he found her playing at a quaint bookstore one rainy afternoon. The cozy space was filled with the scent of old books and fresh coffee, and a small group of people had gathered to listen to her play. Adrian slipped into the back of the room, careful not to draw attention to himself. He watched as Clara moved effortlessly through her set, weaving together classical pieces and original compositions with a warmth that captivated everyone present. After the performance, Adrian waited until the crowd thinned out before approaching her. This time he came with questions rather than arrogance. "How do you do it?" he asked, his tone earnest. Clara raised an eyebrow, surprised by his interest. "Do what?" she replied. Adrian hesitated, unsure how to phrase what he wanted to say. Finally, he blurted out, "How do you make people feel like that? Like they're part of your music?" Clara chuckled softly, as if amused by his curiosity. "It's not about technique," she explained. "Anyone can learn to play notes correctly. What matters is why you're playing them. When I sit down at the piano, I think about the stories I want to tell, the emotions I want to share. If my heart is in it, the audience will feel it too." Her explanation was simple, yet it resonated deeply with Adrian. He realized that he had spent so much time perfecting his skills that he had forgotten why he loved music in the first place. Inspired by Clara's insight, Adrian began attending more of her performances. At first, he went purely out of curiosity, eager to learn more about her approach. But as time passed, he found himself drawn to her personality as well. Unlike him, Clara didn't care about fame or recognition. She played because it brought her joy, and she shared her music freely with anyone who wanted to listen. Her humility and passion reminded Adrian of the reasons he had fallen in love with the piano as a child. During one of their conversations, Adrian confessed his struggles to Clara. "I've always thought being the best meant having the most impressive technique," he admitted. "But now I'm starting to wonder if I've been doing it all wrong." Clara listened patiently, nodding as he spoke. When he finished, she said, "There's nothing wrong with wanting to improve. But don't lose sight of why you started. Music is a gift, not a competition. If you focus on sharing that gift, the rest will fall into place." Her advice stayed with Adrian long after their conversation ended. He began practicing differently, focusing less on flashy runs and complicated passages and more on the feelings behind each piece. He started choosing songs that resonated with him personally, even if they weren't the most technically demanding. At first, it felt strange to step away from the pressure of perfection, but gradually Adrian noticed a change, not just in his playing, but in himself. He felt lighter, freer, as if he had rediscovered a part of himself he had lost along the way. Word of Adrian's transformation spread quickly among the local music community. People who had once dismissed him as arrogant now saw a new side to him, a vulnerability and sincerity that hadn't been there before. Encouraged by this shift, Adrian decided to organize a charity concert to raise funds for underprivileged children. He wanted to use his platform to give back, inspired by Clara's selflessness. When he invited her to perform alongside him, she accepted without hesitation. Together, they planned a program that combined their unique styles. Adrian contributed pieces that showcased his technical brilliance, while Clara brought her heartfelt, soul-stirring compositions. They rehearsed tirelessly, blending their strengths to create a harmonious balance. On the night of the concert, the hall was packed with eager spectators. As Adrian and Clara took the stage together, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. When they began to play, the audience was spellbound. Their music flowed seamlessly, telling stories of triumph, loss, hope, and love. By the end of the evening, the entire hall erupted into a standing ovation. Looking over at Clara during the final bow, Adrian felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had taught him that true artistry wasn't about being the best. It was about touching people's lives. From that day forward, Adrian vowed never to underestimate anyone again, and Clara, ever humble, continued to inspire those lucky enough to hear her play, reminding everyone that music has the power to connect us all. After the charity concert, Adrian's life began to change in ways he never expected. The event had been a huge success, raising more money than anyone had anticipated and earning praise from both critics and attendees alike. But what surprised Adrian most was how much joy he felt during the performance itself. For the first time in years, he hadn't been playing to prove himself or to outshine others. Instead, he had played to share something meaningful with the audience, and it made all the difference. That night, as he packed up his sheet music and prepared to leave the venue, Clara approached him with a warm smile. "You did great tonight," she said simply, her voice soft but sincere. Adrian looked at her, still holding his folder of notes, and felt an unfamiliar lump rise in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, his words coming out in a rush. "You've taught me so much. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." Clara shook her head slightly, dismissing his gratitude with a wave of her hand. "It's not about thanks," she replied. "It's about growth. You're on your own journey now, Adrian. Just keep listening, not just to the music, but to yourself." Her advice stayed with him long after their conversation ended. Over. The following weeks, Adrian found himself reflecting deeply on his relationship with music. He thought about how he had once viewed it as a tool for competition, a way to measure his worth against others. Now he saw it differently, as a language that allowed him to express emotions too complex for words. This newfound perspective gave him a sense of freedom he hadn't known before. No longer burdened by the need to constantly prove himself, Adrian started experimenting with new styles and genres. He even began composing original pieces, something he had avoided in the past because he feared failure. Clara continued to perform regularly around the city, and Adrian made it a point to attend whenever he could. Watching her play always inspired him, not just because of her technical skill, but because of the way she connected with her audience. There was a quiet authenticity to her performances that Adrian admired deeply. It wasn't about dazzling people with flashy tricks. It was about creating moments of genuine connection. One evening, after one of her sets at a small jazz club, Adrian decided to ask her something that had been on his mind for a while. "Do you ever get nervous?" he asked as they sat together at a corner table sipping coffee. Clara tilted her head, considering the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it's not the kind of nervousness you might think. It's not about messing up or being judged. It's more like a reminder that what I'm doing matters, that the music has weight, and I need to honor it." Her answer struck Adrian. He realized that this was another key difference between them. While he had always been driven by external validation, Clara was motivated by an internal sense of purpose. Inspired by her mindset, Adrian decided to take a bold step. He announced that he would host a solo recital, a departure from the flashy, high-energy concerts he used to put on. This time the focus would be entirely on storytelling through music. He chose pieces that resonated with personal experiences, including some of his own compositions. As the date of the recital drew near, Adrian worked tirelessly, pouring his heart into every note. He rehearsed late into the night, fine-tuning each piece until it felt exactly right. Despite his dedication, however, doubts crept in as the big day approached. On the morning of the recital, Adrian woke up feeling anxious. What if the audience didn't understand what he was trying to convey? What if they preferred his old style, the fast-paced, technically impressive performances that had earned him fame? These questions swirled in his mind as he got ready. When he arrived at the venue, he found Clara waiting for him backstage. She must have sensed his unease because she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Just breathe," she said gently. "Remember why you're doing this. Let the music speak for itself." Her words calmed him, grounding him in the present moment. As Adrian stepped onto the stage later that evening, he took a deep breath and focused on the piano in front of him. The room was dimly lit with only a soft spotlight illuminating the instrument. Slowly, he began to play. His opening piece was a slow, haunting melody that told the story of loss and longing. Each note carried weight, echoing through the silent hall. Adrian closed his eyes, letting the music guide him. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about technique or perfection. He was simply allowing himself to feel. As the recital progressed, Adrian moved seamlessly from one piece to the next, weaving together themes of love, struggle, and hope. The audience remained completely silent, hanging on every note. When he finally played the last chord of his final piece, there was a brief pause before the room erupted into applause. People stood up, clapping and cheering, their faces filled with emotion. Some even wiped away tears. Adrian stood up slowly, bowing deeply to acknowledge their response. But instead of basking in the praise, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about sharing a part of himself with others. After the recital, Adrian mingled with the audience, shaking hands and thanking them for coming. Many praised his performance, calling it transformative and unforgettable. One elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "Your music touched my soul tonight," she said softly. "Thank you for reminding me of things I'd forgotten." Her words brought tears to Adrian's own eyes. He realized then that this was what Clara had been talking about all along: the power of music to heal, to connect, and to remind us of our shared humanity. Later that night, as Adrian sat alone in his apartment, he reflected on how far he had come. From the arrogant pianist who cared only about winning approval to the artist who now valued authenticity above all else, his journey had been transformative. And though he knew there was still much to learn, he felt grateful for the path he was on and for the person who had helped set him on it. Clara had shown him that true greatness wasn't about standing above others. It was about lifting them up through the universal language of music. In the months that followed, Adrian continued to grow as a musician and as a person. He collaborated with other artists, explored new forms of expression, and used his platform to support causes close to his heart. Through it all, he kept Clara's lessons close to his mind. Listen to your heart, stay humble, and remember that music is a gift meant to be shared. Meanwhile, Clara remained a steady presence in his life, offering guidance and encouragement whenever he needed it. Together, they reminded everyone around them that art isn't about competition, it's about connection. And in a world often divided by differences, that message was more important than ever. Adrian's newfound approach to music began to ripple through every aspect of his life. He no longer viewed himself as the center of attention, but rather as part of a larger community of artists, each contributing their unique voice to the world. This shift in perspective opened doors he had never imagined. People who had once dismissed him as arrogant now saw him as genuine and approachable. Musicians he admired reached out to collaborate, and invitations to perform at prestigious events poured in. Yet despite the growing recognition, Adrian remained grounded, always remembering the lessons Clara had taught him. One day, while browsing through a local bookstore, Adrian stumbled upon an old piano tucked away in the corner of the shop. It was dusty and slightly out of tune, but there was something charming about it. The store owner, noticing Adrian's interest, explained that the piano belonged to the bookstore and was often used during poetry readings or small gatherings. "Would you like to play it?" the owner asked with a smile. Adrian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He sat down on the worn bench and began to play softly, letting his fingers guide him through a simple melody. Shoppers paused mid-step, drawn in by the unexpected music. By the time he finished, a small crowd had gathered, applauding warmly. The experience gave Adrian an idea. What if he could bring music to places where people least expected it? Inspired by Clara's habit of playing in humble settings, Adrian decided to organize a series of impromptu performances in unconventional locations: bookstores, parks, subway stations, and even hospitals. Each performance would be free and open to anyone who happened to pass by. He called it Music Without Walls, a project aimed at making art accessible to everyone, regardless of background or circumstance. When he shared the concept with Clara, she immediately offered her support. "This is exactly what music should be," she said, "for everyone." The first event took place in a bustling subway station during rush hour. Adrian set up a portable keyboard near the platform, drawing curious glances from commuters hurrying to catch their trains. At first, people seemed unsure, glancing at him with skepticism as they passed. But when Adrian began to play, the atmosphere changed. His opening piece was upbeat and lively, designed to lift spirits. Soon, travelers slowed down, some stopping altogether to listen. A few even tapped their feet or hummed along. By the end of the performance, dozens of people had gathered around, smiling and clapping enthusiastically. Word of Adrian's subway concert spread quickly, and soon other musicians joined in, eager to participate. Clara became a regular collaborator, adding her own soulful interpretations to the mix. Together they transformed ordinary spaces into stages, turning moments of monotony into experiences of wonder. One particularly memorable performance took place in a children's hospital. Adrian and Clara played gentle, soothing melodies for patients and their families, bringing comfort to those enduring difficult times. Afterward, a young girl approached them shyly, clutching a stuffed animal. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your music made me feel happy." Her words stayed with Adrian long after the visit ended, reinforcing his belief in the healing power of music. As music without walls gained popularity, Adrian noticed how it brought people together in unexpected ways. Strangers struck up conversations during performances, sharing stories inspired by the music. In one park, an elderly man approached Adrian after a set and told him how a particular piece reminded him of dancing with his late wife. In another instance, a street artist painted live portraits of Adrian and Clara as they played, capturing the essence of their collaboration in vibrant colors. These interactions reminded Adrian that music wasn't just about sound. It was about connection, memory, and shared humanity. Despite the success of his project, Adrian faced challenges along the way. Some venues were hesitant to allow performances, citing noise complaints or logistical concerns. Others questioned whether such efforts truly made a difference in the grand scheme of things. During moments of doubt, Adrian turned to Clara for encouragement. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she reminded him, "but every note you play plants a seed. You might not see it grow right away, but trust that it will." Clara's unwavering faith kept Adrian motivated, even when things felt uncertain. Over time, he learned to embrace these obstacles as opportunities to adapt and grow. When a venue refused to host a performance, he found creative alternatives, such as moving outdoors or partnering with local businesses. When technical issues arose, he improvised, turning setbacks into spontaneous moments of creativity. Through it all, Adrian discovered that resilience was just as important as talent, and that sometimes the most meaningful moments came from imperfection. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Adrian met Clara for coffee at their favorite cafe. They sat by the window, watching raindrops streak down the glass as they talked. "Do you ever feel like we're doing enough?" Adrian asked suddenly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Clara looked at him thoughtfully before responding. "Enough for what? To change the world? That's not our job. Our job is to keep showing up, keep playing, and let the music do its work. Sometimes that's more than enough." Her words resonated deeply with Adrian, easing the weight of his doubts. He realized that striving for perfection or measuring impact wasn't the point. What mattered was the act of giving, of offering something beautiful to the world without expecting anything in return. This realization freed him from the pressure to constantly achieve and allowed him to focus on the joy of creating. As months turned into years, Adrian's reputation evolved from that of a self-centered virtuoso to a compassionate advocate for the arts. His projects inspired others to follow suit, sparking a movement of musicians using their talents to make a difference. Schools invited him to speak to students about the importance of staying true to oneself. Community centers requested workshops where he and Clara taught aspiring artists how to connect with audiences authentically. Through it all, Adrian remained humble, always crediting Clara for helping him rediscover the heart of music. Their friendship deepened over time, built on mutual respect and admiration. While Adrian thrived on innovation and big ideas, Clara provided balance with her quiet wisdom and steady presence. She reminded him to slow down and appreciate the little things, the laughter of children during a park performance, the gratitude of a stranger moved to tears, the warmth of a shared meal after a long day. These moments, she insisted, were just as valuable as any standing ovation. Though Adrian's journey had taken him far from the arrogant pianist he once was, he knew he still had much to learn. Music, he realized, was a lifelong teacher, always offering new lessons if one was willing to listen. And as long as Clara was by his side, guiding him with her gentle insights, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they continued to share their gift with the world, proving that even the simplest melodies could leave a lasting impression. As the years went by, Adrian and Clara's partnership grew stronger, both in music and in friendship. They became a familiar duo in the city, known not just for their talent, but also for their kindness and generosity. Their performances were no longer about showcasing individual skill. They had transformed into shared experiences that brought people together. Whether it was a quiet evening at a cafe or a lively outdoor festival, their music created moments of connection that lingered long after the last note had faded. One summer, Adrian came up with an idea that excited him more than anything he had done before. He wanted to organize a large-scale community event called Harmony Day, where musicians, artists, and performers from all walks of life could come together to celebrate creativity. The event would feature live music, art exhibits, poetry readings, and workshops for children and adults alike. It wasn't just about entertainment. It was about fostering a sense of unity and belonging. When Adrian shared his vision with Clara, she immediately embraced it. "This is what music should be doing," she said with a smile. "Bringing people closer." Planning Harmony Day required months of hard work and collaboration. Adrian reached out to local businesses, schools, and cultural organizations, inviting them to participate. To his surprise, everyone he approached was eager to help. Artists offered to display their work, teachers volunteered to lead workshops, and even restaurants agreed to provide food and drinks. Clara played a key role in organizing the musical lineup, ensuring that performers of all ages and backgrounds were included. Together they worked tirelessly, driven by the belief that art had the power to inspire change. On the morning of Harmony Day, the park where the event was being held buzzed with energy. Stages were set up, booths lined the pathways, and colorful banners fluttered in the breeze. Families arrived early, spreading blankets on the grass and settling in for a day of fun. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the festivities began. Musicians took turns performing on different stages, filling the air with melodies ranging from classical symphonies to lively folk songs. Painters worked on canvases in full view of the audience, while poets recited verses that stirred hearts. Children laughed as they painted murals or tried their hand at playing instruments under the guidance of patient instructors. Adrian and Clara kicked off the main stage performance with a duet that left the crowd spellbound. They chose a piece that blended Clara's emotional depth with Adrian's technical brilliance, creating a sound that was uniquely theirs. As they played, people stopped what they were doing to listen, drawn in by the harmony between the two pianists. When the final notes echoed into silence, the entire park erupted into applause. For a moment, Adrian and Clara stood side by side, taking in the sea of smiling faces before them. It was a reminder of why they had started this journey, to create beauty that transcended barriers and touched lives. Throughout the day, Adrian wandered through the park, soaking in the atmosphere. He watched as strangers struck up conversations, over shared interests as parents danced with their children, and as elderly couples swayed to nostalgic tunes. At one booth, he saw a young boy struggling to master a simple tune on a borrowed guitar. A professional musician nearby knelt down to offer encouragement, guiding the boy's fingers until he managed to play a clean chord. The boy's face lit up with pride, and Adrian felt a lump rise in his throat. Moments like these made all the effort worthwhile. Clara, too, found joy in observing the impact of the event. She spent much of her time at the children's area, helping kids experiment with percussion instruments and teaching them how to express themselves through rhythm. Her patience and warmth drew crowds of curious youngsters who giggled and clapped, along as she led impromptu jam sessions. One little girl, no older than 6, approached her shyly holding a handmade tambourine. "Can I play with you?" she asked hesitantly. Clara smiled and nodded, handing her a pair of sticks. "Of course, let's make some magic together." By the end of the session, the girl was grinning ear to ear, having discovered the thrill of making music. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, Adrian and Clara gathered on the main stage once more for the closing performance. This time, they invited all the musicians who had participated in the event to join them. The stage filled with people, some professional, others amateur, all united by their love of music. Together, they performed a grand finale, a medley, of songs that represented the diversity of the community. Voices rose in unison, instruments blended seamlessly, and the audience sang along, swaying to the rhythm. It was a powerful moment, a testament to the strength of collective creativity. When the final chord rang out, the crowd erupted into cheers, many waving sparklers that had been handed out earlier. Adrian stepped forward to address the audience, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said simply. "This wouldn't have been possible without each and every one of you. Today has shown us that when we come together, we can create something truly extraordinary." Beside him, Clara added, "Let's carry this spirit forward, not just today, but every day. Art belongs to everyone, and it's our job to share it." The success of Harmony Day sparked a wave of inspiration throughout the city. Other neighborhoods began hosting similar events, inspired by Adrian and Clara's example. Schools incorporated more arts programming into their curriculums, recognizing the importance of creative expression. Even local government officials took notice, pledging support for initiatives that promoted accessibility to the arts. What had started as a single event blossomed into a movement, proving that small actions could lead to big changes. For Adrian, Harmony Day marked a turning point in his life. He realized that his purpose wasn't just to create music, but to use it as a tool for building bridges. Wherever he went, he sought opportunities to uplift others, whether by mentoring young musicians or advocating for underfunded arts programs. His arrogance was now a distant memory, replaced by humility and gratitude. He often thought back to the night he first met Clara, recalling how her quiet confidence had challenged everything he believed about himself. Without her, he might never have embarked on this journey of growth and discovery. Clara, meanwhile, remained steadfast in her commitment to simplicity and authenticity. Though she appreciated the recognition that came with their joint efforts, she continued to prioritize the joy of playing over fame or accolades. Her influence extended beyond her performances. She became a mentor to aspiring artists, encouraging them to trust their instincts and find their own voices. Together, Adrian and Clara formed a perfect balance, one fueled by ambition and innovation, the other grounded in sincerity and heart. Years later, when people spoke of Adrian and Clara, they didn't just remember their music. They remembered the way they had transformed the city, bringing people together and inspiring countless others to pursue their passions. Their legacy wasn't defined by awards or records, but by the connections they fostered and the lives they touched. And though neither of them sought credit for their contributions, their impact was undeniable, a testament to the enduring power of art to unite, heal, and inspire. As they stood side by side one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Adrian turned to Clara with a smile. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said softly. Clara nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Yes," she replied, "but there's still so much more to do." In that moment, Adrian knew she was right. Their journey was far from over, and perhaps it never would be. After all, music was infinite, and so was its potential to bring people closer. As the years rolled on, Adrian and Clara's lives became intertwined in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their friendship deepened into a bond that went beyond music, rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. They were no longer just collaborators. They were partners in creating meaningful change through art. Though their paths often diverged as they pursued individual projects, they always found their way back to each other, drawn together by their belief in the transformative power of music. One crisp autumn morning, Adrian received an invitation that filled him with both excitement and trepidation. A prestigious international music festival had asked him to perform as a featured artist. It was an opportunity many musicians dreamed of, but Adrian hesitated. He worried about returning to the world of high-profile performances, fearing it might pull him back into old habits, chasing applause instead of connection. Sensing his unease, Clara encouraged him to accept the offer. "You've grown so much," she said. "This is your chance to show the world what you've learned." With Clara's support, Adrian agreed to participate. He spent weeks preparing for the performance, carefully selecting pieces that reflected his journey. From the flashy compositions of his early career to the heartfelt melodies he now embraced. For the final piece, he decided to write something entirely new, inspired by his experiences with Clara and the countless people he had met along the way. The composition was unlike anything he had ever created, a blend of classical structure and raw emotion, designed to tell a story without words. The night of the performance arrived, and Adrian stood backstage, his heart pounding. The venue was grand, filled with thousands of people eager to hear from one of the most talked-about pianists of the decade. As he walked onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause, but Adrian didn't let it distract him. He took a deep breath, sat at the piano, and began to play. His fingers moved across the keys with precision, but there was a new softness in his touch, a reflection of the lessons he had learned. Each note carried weight, telling the story of his transformation from arrogance to humility, from isolation to connection. When Adrian reached the final piece, the one he had written specifically for this occasion, the atmosphere shifted. The melody started softly, almost hesitant, mirroring the doubts and fears he had once felt. Gradually it built in intensity, growing richer and more complex as it unfolded. By the time he played the last chord, there was a profound sense of resolution, not just in the music, but within Adrian himself. The audience sat in stunned silence before erupting into a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Tears streamed down Adrian's face as he bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the response. After the concert, Adrian was approached by journalists and fellow musicians eager to discuss his performance. But what touched him most were the messages from ordinary people who had attended the show. One woman wrote to thank him for reminding her of the beauty and vulnerability. Another man shared how the final piece had brought back memories of his late father, helping him find closure after years of grief. These stories reinforced Adrian's belief that music wasn't just entertainment, it was a lifeline, a source of healing and understanding. Meanwhile, Clara continued to make her mark in quieter yet equally impactful ways. She began teaching music at a community center, working with children who had little access to formal education in the arts. Her classes weren't just about learning notes or techniques. They were about self-expression and confidence building. Many of her students came from challenging backgrounds, and Clara saw firsthand how music gave them hope and a sense of belonging. One boy, in particular, stood out to her. Timid and withdrawn when he first joined the class, he gradually blossomed. Under Clara's guidance, discovering a passion for composing his own songs, Adrian often visited Clara's classes, marveling at the joy and energy in the room. Watching her interact with the children reminded him of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. Inspired by her work, he started volunteering at the center, offering master classes and mentoring older students who showed promise. Together, they created a nurturing environment where creativity could flourish, regardless of skill level or background. The success of the program caught the attention of local media, leading to increased funding and resources for the center. Despite their busy schedules, Adrian and Clara made time for personal projects as well. Adrian released an album featuring collaborations with artists from diverse genres: jazz, folk, classical, and even electronic music. Each track told a different story, celebrating the richness of human experience. Clara, on the other hand, embarked on a solo tour, performing intimate concerts in small towns and rural areas. Her goal was to bring music to places where it was rarely heard, ensuring that no one felt left out of the artistic conversation. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. Both Adrian and Clara were honored with awards recognizing their contributions to the arts and their commitment to social causes. At the award ceremony, Adrian delivered a speech that echoed Clara's philosophy. "Music isn't mine to keep. It belongs to everyone. My job is simply to share it." His words resonated deeply with the audience, earning him a standing ovation. When Clara accepted her award later that evening, she dedicated it to all the unsung heroes who worked tirelessly to make art accessible to everyone. As the years passed, Adrian and Clara grew older, but their passion for music never waned. They continued to perform, teach, and advocate for the arts, leaving behind a legacy that extended far beyond their individual achievements. Their story became a testament to the idea that true greatness lies not in standing above others, but in lifting them up. Countless musicians, educators, and activists credited Adrian and Clara with inspiring them to pursue their dreams and use their talents for good. In their later years, Adrian and Clara slowed down, spending more time reflecting on their journey than actively shaping it. They often sat together on the porch of Clara's countryside home, watching the sun set over rolling hills. Sometimes they reminisced about the early days, their first meeting at the cafe, the challenges they had faced, and the victories they had celebrated. Other times they simply enjoyed the quiet companionship they had built over decades of shared experiences. One evening, as they listened to the distant sound of crickets chirping, Adrian turned to Clara with a smile. "Do you remember that night at the cafe?" he asked. Clara chuckled softly. "How could I forget? You looked so sure of yourself back then." Adrian laughed, shaking his head. "I thought I knew everything. Turns out, I didn't know anything until I met you." Clara reached over and patted his hand gently. "We've both changed a lot since then," she said. "But the important thing is that we kept growing, kept learning." Adrian nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And we'll keep doing that," he replied, "until the very end." Though Adrian and Clara eventually passed away, their influence lived on in the countless lives they had touched. Their music continued to inspire, their teachings shaped future generations, and their message of unity through art remained as relevant as ever. In the end, they proved that the true measure of a life well lived isn't fame or fortune. It's the connections we forge and the love we leave behind. And in that, Adrian and Clara succeeded beyond measure.